Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Today is explanation of upcoming episode Throne of Seal based on novel. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. So let's start. Not become too strong, or else, when you will ascend to the level of God, only loneliness will be awaiting you. And you will be subject to very powerful laws and limitations. Simply saying, every elemental essence around you is part of a god. In this world, we are the same as fusions of several gods. If you truly become a god, parts of your original memories might even disappear. Kia asked next, right now, when the demon god emperor ripped the illusory paradise open to save those demons, he also used the term godhead that you just mentioned. He seemed to be really intent to obtain a godhead. Why are you saying that becoming a god is no good? Yi Xiaolei's eyes were filled with some fear. That guy is not the same. His aura clearly doesn't originate from this world of ours, so he isn't affected by its rules and restrictions. But it also means that he cannot get one godhead here like you could. If he would truly manage to obtain a godhead, and if his strength breaks through to the sufficient level, he will very possibly become the eternal ruler of this world. At that time, no one will ever be able to stop him. Arriving at this point, Yi Xiaolei's look suddenly became all the more concerned. Staring at Kia before looking at the nearby Long Haochen, she tightened her brows, seemingly pondering deeply over something. Kia could tell that this little girl didn't tell her everything about this important matter, but to her, although becoming a god had its perks as well as its disadvantages, it was still a very distant matter. Isn't a godhead part of being a god? Then how could something like that be plundered? Kia asked, filled with doubts. Yi Xiaolei suddenly became somewhat irascible. It could be under some particular circumstances. Okay, don't ask further. I already told you everything I should tell you. Anyway, in the future, you'd better not become gods and that's it. As for that one guy, he is merely following a delusion. How could it be so easy to steal a godhead? If the worst comes to the worst, I can just... Arriving at this point, her words suddenly came to a stop, and she didn't say anything more after giving Kia a vigilant look. However, Kia didn't just stop there and kept asking, then, what would be the boundary to becoming a god? Yi Xiaolei shot her a glance, but didn't reply this time. Kia suddenly revealed a little smile. Actually, I already know about that. Yi Xiaolei snorted with disdain. With your current strength, how could you know? The boundary is 1,000,000 units of internal spiritual energy, isn't it? Kia said with a smile. Yi Xiaolei looked at her with a start, her expression already revealing her thoughts. At that point, Kia didn't keep asking any further. She simply returned to Long Haochen's side, before sitting cross-legged, and shutting her eyes to start cultivating. Since Long Haochen was all right, she didn't keep worrying. The others who had been listening to the conversation between Kia and Yi Xiaolei all wore different expressions. Nonetheless, this only lasted for a brief time. After all, the distance before ascending to the rank of a god was still too far in the future. Time passed gradually in the illusory paradise, and Yi Xiaolei seemed somewhat bored as she sat to a side, with a total of 8 spiritual stoves revolving around her quietly, as if obeying her will. She didn't express the intention to let anyone from the 21st General Grade Demon Hunt Squad absorb these spiritual stoves, but didn't retake them either. Who knew what she was currently thinking about? She only occasionally gave a look in Long Haochen's direction, thus the matter she was thinking about was bound to be related to him. A whole day passed this way, and in the end, when dawn arrived on the 3rd day, a change happened on Long Haochen's body. At this very moment, he only felt his own body being soaked in an ocean, with an endless surge of gentle light tapping against his body. This wonderful feeling was something he had never experienced before, causing waves of comprehension to reach his thoughts one after another. A transparent golden radiance also slowly spread from his body. As he also sat cross-legged with haste, a pair of spiritual wings far larger than Sima's yarn and her news appeared on his back. On Long Haochen's forehead, 9 patterns emerged. They appeared purple at first, but rapidly turned golden. The surface of his skin shimmered like a gem, making his appearance unclear and hazy. The sunshine was growing more and more intense, as the golden color on Long Haochen's body grew stronger. At his feet, a diverging golden halo started to take shape as well. This halo was extremely peculiar. In the magnificent golden light, the patterns on its edge were like brilliant pieces of the sun. The resplendent center of this manifestation was at Long Haochen's feet. An illusory golden luster slowly spread from his head. This figure seemed similar to the light elemental fairy Yating, but looked very translucent and unclear to the eyes. It reached 3 meters in size, spread a soft light, and descended slowly to gradually dissolve into Long Houchen's body. A low chant was issued from Yating's mouth. Ever since Long Houchen had entered the state of awakening, she had been floating in the air, and now that Long Houchen had formally entered the state of awakening, her face was filled with absolute joy. As the golden brilliance was merging into Long Houchen's body, Yating's body also started to change. Drops of golden streamed out from Long Houchen's body and enveloped Yating. Under their influence, her whole body was remodeled. Her size changed, and the past illusory impression disappeared completely. Not only that, but Yating now carried a compact golden staff in her right hand. It was perfectly straight and similar to Yating in size. On its caltrop-shaped top, a dazzling golden gem was embedded. In addition to this, a gem also appeared on Yating's forehead. At her feet was now another small halo, with the same appearance as the one under Long Houchen. But this wasn't the biggest change on her. The biggest change was the aura that she radiated. Originally, she only had a holy aura, but now, her body emitted an aura of life. She was now not merely an intelligent light elemental fairy, but a real fairy, a fairy of light. From this moment onward, she wasn't just Long Houchen's supportive spiritual stove, but also possessed the ability to attack enemies and boost allies. She had completely regained her life as a fairy. Of course, she was still Long Houchen's spiritual stove by contract, and this was an unchangeable reality. By leaving Long Houchen, she would lose the benediction from the sign of light's heavenly physique, and would perhaps return to her former state. Long Houchen started a long chant, and Yating looked up at him. She softly murmured something before an odd scene happened, starting first of all with the little fairy. Under her original pair of wings appeared another pair. These new delicate wings gradually unfolded, and her whole body's presence underwent a total change. It gained in length until she was close to a meter. From the gem on her forehead emerged a horn, and on her staff appeared some magnificent designs. Exactly, receiving the gains from Long Houchen's awakening, Yating evolved once again, and this was her third evolution ever since following Long Houchen. But she wasn't the only one to undergo a change. At the same time, an even more astonishing change took place on Long Houchen's back. His originally enormous wings slowly stretched, and another pair surprisingly appeared right under his main wings. This change was similarly to what happened to Yating, and it was still not over. The golden feathers that covered his wings were now a lot thicker than before, indistinctly emitting some exceptionally beautiful golden spheres of light. So the wings of a human powerhouse could actually come in double pairs. Along with this, a golden pillar of light suddenly rose behind Long Houchen. It was Zhong Fangfang, whose body slowly floated upwards, enveloped by the golden pillar of light. On his back, the golden feathers suddenly appeared more substantial, and his whole body instantly became brilliant, before returning to its normal state. His right fist still maintained that transparent look, just like a golden crystal sculpture. Brilliant body. It was exactly the influence from Long Houchen's awakening as a god's chosen one, which, added up with his own efforts, and the stimulation from the past battle, enabled Zhong Fangfang to finally break through the bottleneck, reaching the threshold of the seventh step which had blocked him for so long. He was now a temple knight at the seventh step, which could be called unexpected happy news. Although Han Yu and Sima Xian, who also possessed the same light element, didn't make a cool progress like a breakthrough, the light element surrounding their bodies had clearly gained in substance. This perfectly straight golden pillar of light slowly dissipated, and the sunshine illuminated the whole earth anew, bringing its radiance to the illusory paradise. Long Houchen slowly opened his eyes. The instant his eyes opened, the air was torn by 2 bolts of lightning, but the atmosphere quickly returned to normal. Turning his head to look at the deeply concerned Kia at his side, Long Houchen said apologetically, "I made you worry." Kia didn't say anything, only silently leaned on his shoulder, and grabbed his hand tightly. Long Houchen didn't anticipate this surprising change. Witnessing Arbao's desperate attack on the hilltop under the influence of the dense breath of life in the air, and the fog of light that Yating had absorbed before, he had only felt himself going in a fantastic state. When seeing Arbao transform into a devil dragon, he had thought of retreating, conscientious of his comrades. For this reason, he had already been prepared to launch the eternal melody to bring his comrades and Yi Xiaolei back to the Tower of Eternity. Borrowing strength from the world for this attack, he had fallen completely into a flash of realization, and had started the process of his awakening as the sign of light. Countless fantastic scenes had appeared without pause in his head, surges of comprehension hovering around in his mind. At the time he woke up, the mysteries concerning his identity, as the sign of light, was sealed deeply into his brain. The sign of light was the person who had the blessing of the goddess of light. He was the spokesperson of the sun. He was the one who would be loved by the entire brilliance of the sun, and thus be able to borrow strength from the sun and the goddess of light to make up for all his deficiencies. This was the true legend of the sign of light. If not for this, it would just be his cultivation that was a bit faster than that of ordinary people, and his comprehension over light element that would be a bit stronger. Wouldn't that make the sign of light just too weak? Long Houchen finally understood how the sign of samsara had managed to wound the demon god emperor heavily while only reaching a third of his level of cultivation, causing the death of that generation's demon god emperor. This was surely because the sign of samsara of those times had been awakened. If Long Houchen could be said to draw support from light, then the sign of samsara's power could be said to be the power of slaughter. He is the person blessed by the god of war. Long Houchen's awakening had happened in the illusory paradise, a place filled with light, which was intimately connected to nature. But if Caia wanted to awaken as the saint daughter of samsara, she would have to do it in a battlefield filled with slaughter and the reeking of blood. Only through unceasing battles in a place filled with the odor of slaughter would she truly comprehend the mysteries as the saint daughter of samsara. All the golden light finally vanished, and the two pairs of spiritual wings on Long Houchen's back flapped once. This caused his body to rise a sixth of a meter above the ground, before returning to the ground. He still seemed unaccustomed to his new four wings. A dense essence of light circulated around him, and Long Houchen appeared even calmer in temper and more mature. He also seemed to have gained a bit in size, and now, only by looking at his appearance, no one would be able to tell that he was only 15. He looked closer to a man in his 20s. After awakening, the sign of light wasn't only astonishingly handsome, but also gained a fantastic attractiveness. Just from seeing him, anyone would unawarely feel somehow attracted by the kind of warmth radiated by him. "Hey, let's have a chat." Yi Xiaolei's voice was heard from the side. Long Houchen turned around, the four wings on his back vanishing. Yating threw herself at Long Houchen's chest with a voice full of excitement, before vanishing into his chest. After his awakening, Long Houchen was now to her the same as the mother of light that helped her grow. Seeing those 8 spiritual stoves revolving around Yi Xiaolei, Long Houchen nodded in response. "Follow me." Yi Xiaolei waved to him, heading to a lower part of the hill. Long Houchen made a gesture to tell his comrades to wait, before immediately following her. Yi Xiaolei didn't go too far away, but she seemed to have something important to say. It was truly strange to see that expression on a 6 or 7-year-old looking girl. Somewhere halfway down the hill, Yi Xiaolei turned around. A green luster full of the essence of life spread out, enveloping Long Houchen and herself inside. "Younger sister, what do you want to tell me?" Long Houchen asked with a smile. Even with the appearance of an only 6 or 7 years old girl, the instant Yi Xiaolei discerned that sunshine-like smile, she couldn't help but blank out. The words that came out next from her mouth were, "You're so nice-looking, even a fairy wouldn't be as pretty as you." The corner of Long Houchen's mouth twitched in response to that. "Please use the word handsome, pretty is a word used to describe girls." Yi Xiaolei stuck out her tongue. "What does it have to do with that? Based on the human way to count age, I am at least 10,000 years old. In front of me, you're no more but a damn little kid." Long Houchen remained silent as he looked at her. He believed the girl's words, but saying that she would be a senior from ancient times felt unrealistic, because this girl's appearance was pretty much the same as a little girl. Seeing his stoic appearance, Yi Xiaolei seemed satisfied, as the worries filling her eased up by a lot. However, she quickly became aggravated, declaring in anger, "You're really annoying." Long Houchen replied with a bitter smile, "If I'm not mistaken, we have just been helping you." "How is that annoying?" Yi Xiaolei replied as a matter of course you're annoying. You are the sign of light, so why are you letting yourself be infected with the power of necromancer, the magic of quite a powerful necromancer? Are you mad? Aren't you afraid of your own heart of light becoming corrupted? Long Houchen gave her a serious look. "If you have a method to help me remove my connection with him, I will be extremely grateful towards you." Yi Xiaolei was startled for a bit. "Tell me how you crossed paths with that necromancer." "I am listening." Long Houchen then told his story in the desolate hissing cavern, as well as the matters that happened in the Tower of Eternity. Hearing his words, Yi Xiaolei became speechless for a while, looking at him in a daze. How is that possible? A necromancer of light element? Oh my god. Could this guy have been the same as you, a god's chosen one of the goddess of light? This is too unbelievable. Since a chosen of the goddess of light has become a necromancer, Something deep definitely has happened to him. Long Houchen asked in astonishment, is it that only a light element user with the physique of a sign of light can train in light elemental necromancy? Yi Xiaolai gave him a serious nod, yes. Necromancer is a filthy vocation, coming into contacts with corpses and death. It's the highest possible blasphemy to light, and only the purest body of the sign of light can avoid being corrupted by this filthiness, keeping his pure heart while cultivating as a holy necromancer. But this is even more difficult to accomplish than it would be for you to succeed the goddess of nature. This guy is simply the greatest genius among humans. Regarding the definition of a god's chosen one, Long Houchen had gotten its entire understanding and didn't need her to explain it any further. However, this still shocked him to the greatest extent. Could that holy necromancer, the slumbering calamity Elux, also be a god's chosen one? And one that appeared thousands of years ago? Long Houchen and Yi Xiaolei looked at each other. Looking lifeless, they were filled with total shock. They had a common subject of curiosity, and this was the reason why the slumbering calamity, sign of light of that time, chose to become a necromancer. I cannot help you. Yi Xiaolei said with some bitterness, given that this slumbering calamity Elux was powerful enough to leave a spatially connected tower, he ought to have reached the level of half-god. This is far from what I can handle. Even if my sister was still there, she wouldn't be able to remove your connection with him either. I just wonder what happened to him. I believe that when you will be able to reach the top of that tower and receive his true inheritance, you should get some of his memories. Reaching this point, she let out a light sigh, but even a light elemental necromancer is still a necromancer. Necromancy being the counterpart of life, and since I am of life element, I cannot leave this place with you. It's such a shame after I've been waiting for so many years, and finally found a god's chosen one such as you, that I still cannot leave. Just tell me whether you are annoying. I've been already waiting for more than 10,000 years, you know. Long Houchen was left speechless, and just didn't know how he should reply to her, only giving her a helpless look. After giving him a long dissatisfied look, Yi Xiaolei finally proposed, okay, how about making a deal with me? How does that sound? What kind of deal? Long Houchen gave her an alarmed look. This girl shouldn't be judged by her appearance of 6 or 7 years old girl, and was probably the guardian of this illusory paradise. Yi Xiaolei unhappily continued, why are you being so tense? This will not be harmful to you, you will only profit. Do you see these? She pointed the 8 spiritual stoves at her side. Long Houchen gave a serious nod. Yi Xiaolei said next, these spiritual stoves are all for you, and I can exempt you from having to pass the next test before leaving the illusory paradise. You'll just have to directly go through the last test. This way, as long as these guys aren't too greedy, and do not have too many spiritual stoves assimilated, there will fundamentally not be any problem, and the benefits will be enormous. Seeing her somehow exaggerated expression, with her hands extended widely, Long Houchen remained unmoved, and asked very seriously, then, what will I have to do? Hey, are you okay with that or not? You don't have the drive of a man at all. Will it kill you to give me a direct answer? Yi Xiaolei responded in great dissatisfaction. Long Houchen's shoulders appeared stiff. It is not only for myself that I have to take responsibility, but for my comrades too. Yi Xiaolei said, but this is unrelated to them. I only want to keep contact with you, by mental connection, for the future, when I will need your help. Only a monkey would refuse. For example. Long Houchen didn't relax, and kept asking. Yi Xiaolei opened her eyes wide, what kind of example do you want? Long Houchen replied, I want to know about the worst kind of situation that would happen to need my help. Yi Xiaolei suddenly looked angered, if it really comes to the worst, it will only be convenient for you. This won't come out with any loss for you. Don't tell me that you not only look like a girl, but your nature is just as dawdling too. If you don't want to make a deal, then let's leave it at that. Long Houchen didn't get angry, but just turned around and headed to the direction of the hilltop. Yi Xiaolei had been really angered by him, stamping her own feet on the ground, but followed him in the end. If it really comes to the worst possible situation, and you don't help me, you humans are done for. Long Houchen turned back again, looking at her with a smile before doing a gesture to hint her that he would like to know about the details. About half an hour later, when Long Houchen and Yi Xiaolei returned to the hilltop, their expressions returned to normal. It looked as if nothing had happened. Long Houchen smiled while looking at the others, including Zhong Fangfang, who was sitting in a cultivating state. Everyone, let's share the spiritual stoves. The 8 spiritual stoves that were originally gathered close to Yi Xiaolei now revolved above Long Haochen's head. Everyone from the 21st General Grade Demon Hunt Squad looked at each other, before suddenly crying out in cheers. Long Haochen turned around to look at Yi Xiaolei, expressing, "I'll be troubling you." Yi Xiaolei unhappily replied, I know. Saying that, she did movements of her finger causing a bunch of green lights to head for everyone. Feeling as if their bodies were stuck into a sticky liquid, the others felt unable to move, and immediately, they saw spiritual stoves fly towards their direction. However, this didn't mean that everyone got spiritual stoves. Long Haochen didn't get any, Kia obtained 1, and out of the others, Wang Yuanyuan didn't get any more spiritual stoves. On the contrary, Han Yu, who didn't obtain any before, instead got 2, and 2 of those were left appeared in front of Zhong Fangfang. Yi Xiaolei waved her hand, declaring, I am doing the best distribution based on your own compatibilities. Everyone, absorb your respective spiritual stoves. Then you can leave from this place. Kia gave Long Haochen a pondering look, as if asking why he didn't get any spiritual stove at all. Long Haochen shook his head with a smile, I obtained enough from this trip. Yi Xiaolei said with a snort, there were just none fitting him and that's all. Just hurry up and do it. All the others rapidly went to absorb their own spiritual stoves. Wang Yuanyuan, who stayed idle, unconsciously looked at Zhong Fangfang, who was cultivating far from them. At that time, Zhong Fangfang opened his eyes little by little. His eyes emitted a faint golden light, happening to look right at her. Wang Yuanyuan's face looked totally stiff in reaction to that look, before she nodded to him. Long Haochen declared, Brother Zhong, hurry up to assimilate them. These 2 spiritual stoves are for you. Of course, it wasn't that among these spiritual stoves, none were suited for Long Haochen. A total of 5 belonged to the light element. Sima Xian got 1 of these, while Han Yu and Zhong Fangfang also got 2 each. These could all be absorbed by Long Haochen, but according to Yi Xiaolei's words, absorbing too many of these spiritual stoves of low grade would instead be limiting his future possibilities. And in addition, along with his awakening as a god's chosen one, the sign of light, Long Haochen sensed a new gap that formed between his comrades and himself. He also thought about helping his comrades grow as fast as possible. Everyone was after all part of the same team, and too wide gap within the team would be very harmful to the future growth of the whole group. For this reason, he expressed to Yi Xiaolei his will to renounce on these before returning, and borrowed her mouth to tell the others that none of the spiritual stoves was suitable for him. Because this was just a preliminary absorption, the process was very simple, then everyone had happy expressions after accomplishing this initial assimilation. When the last person finished to assimilate his spiritual stove, Yi Xiaolei declared, okay, you can return to the shrine now. Remember that the last test of the illusory paradise cannot be avoided, and it will consist of fusing spiritual stoves. Those in your group who gained 2 or more spiritual stoves will need a great willpower to manage that. In case you fail, the better result will be the dispersion of the spiritual stoves, but it is highly possible that you will lose your life. That's right, this was the greatest mystery of the illusory paradise. No matter how many spiritual stoves one obtained here, in the end all of them are fused as one, but this great danger is also an opportunity. The finally fused spiritual stoves will be bound to gain an enormous boost in power, but in case of failure, it will also come with an enormous cost. Perhaps those who were taken away by the demon god emperor could rely on their particular methods to assimilate some spiritual stoves, but they would also lose the chance of fusion. This was actually the greatest secret known to the priest temple. The reason why the Temple Alliance dared agree to let those demons in was that they didn't fear letting them obtain more spiritual stoves. When fusing more than 3 spiritual stoves, the danger would be enormously high and the chances of success infinitely low. And moreover, the illusory paradise in itself rejected the darkness element. However, the Temple Alliance and the higher-ups of the priest temple didn't expect that the demon god emperor could meddle in this way, saving those demon powerhouses and ruining their plans totally. And this time, the demon powerhouses killed the great majority of the demon hunters that entered. In terms of damage, both parties lost a lot, but the demons lost a lot more. It was after all only successors from various demon gods that died in this trip. Lumps of feeble light set in movement autonomously, taking the shape of green balls floating behind everyone's back. Following them were flickers of green light that covered their bodies, disappearing along. Long Haochen was the last to disappear. Yi Xiaolei waved her hand to him, declaring gently the words, thank you. How could she possibly be unable to differentiate good from evil? It was just that she was an extremely stubborn person, who refused to acknowledge it out of her own mouth. Bizarre changes happened on everyone, who became alone in a green space, only filled with endless green and applying an unsurpassable binding. Unable to leave from this place, everyone completed their own assimilations of spiritual stoves in a cross-legged position. Since everyone absorbed a different amount of spiritual stoves, the process of assimilation was naturally different for all of them. The trial to start this process was directly cancelled by Yi Xiaolei, thus they were saved from this trial, and would directly be brought to fuse their own spiritual stoves. Among them, the one who had the most effortless time was undoubtedly Long Haochen. He didn't get any new spiritual stoves in the illusory paradise, and thus only remained here for a bit, before leaving for the next space with a flicker of light in the midst of green undulations. Then, his last trial for the fusion of spiritual stoves began. The others didn't have such an easy time. For the process of the assimilation, Wang Yuanyuan and Kia obtained only one new spiritual stove, while the others all had 2 spiritual stoves to assimilate completely. Although it went by the sequential order, assimilating several spiritual stoves normally required one to pass through a quite considerable difficulty. Kia rapidly fused with her spiritual stoves. As the wielder of the Constitution, as the saint daughter of Samsara, and the only other gods chosen one apart from Long Haochen, fusing a spiritual stove of same attributes as hers was totally lacking in challenge, even if this was already the 3rd spiritual stove that she absorbed. The spiritual stove Kia absorbed this time could naturally not compare with her own spiritual stove of Samsara, but it was of the same tier as her 1,000 strikes spiritual stove. This spiritual stove bore the name of Real Shadow. It was only fitting to be used by assassins, because only assassins with the doppelganger ability could display the full power of this spiritual stove. When used, Real Shadow would enable to make the afterimages created by an assassin real. In its original state, the spiritual stove of Real Shadow would produce these effects for a duration of roughly 3 seconds, but as it would keep evolving, this duration would increase. Its greatest utility was the ability of making afterimages real, giving them the same fighting power as their user. Although only lasting for 3 seconds, its effects were undoubtedly game-changing in some crucial times. Given Kia's strength, with the addition of this true shadow, the effectiveness of her attacks in the battlefield would undoubtedly increase several folds. Just imagine, if she used the spiritual stove of Samsara, while also using the real shadow, how frightful would that be? Of course, this spiritual stove wasn't something that one could use as one pleases. 3 times a day would be the maximum number of times it could be used. Wang Yuanyuan was only a bit slower than Kia to assimilate her spiritual stove. Since she only needed to fuse with a single spiritual stove, the spatial gate that corresponded to her attribute, fusing with it went rapidly. After that, she actually directly crossed over that green pool, and was the first to appear in the front of the Shrine of Nature. Only possessing a single spiritual stove, she didn't need to undergo the fusing process, and thus became the first one to profit from this trip in the illusory paradise. Of course, she could currently not leave the illusory paradise yet, and still needed to wait for her comrades to come out, in particular Long Haochen. Directly leaving wouldn't be convenient to them, so she had to pass through the Tower of Eternity to leave. The process of fusing the spiritual stoves could be called fiery for Sima Xian's case. His facial hair aside, all his body's hairs stood by the effect of the ferocious thunder. The spiritual stove of purple thunder had a terrifyingly obvious offensive power, comparable to the 2nd tier of the spiritual stoves. Its power was as one might imagine, and moreover, Sima Xian's attribute of mastery wasn't thunder. After all, practically no human with thunder as their natural attribute of mastery existed in this world. For this reason, it became all the more difficult for him. The pain from the fusion with this mere spiritual stove of purple thunder gave him such a pain that he would almost feel better dying, but Sima Xian's tenacity wasn't weaker than any other human. If he didn't have this incredible dedication and tenacity, how would he choose to cross the path of violence as a priest? This guy shouted loudly in invigoration, while fusing with this spiritual stove of purple thunder. Perhaps it was his intrepid side that finally conquered the heart of the spiritual stove of purple lightning, as he finally started to complete the process of this assimilation. His other spiritual stove was a lot easier to fuse. This spiritual stove was called Light of Double Exposure, and was selected very carefully for him by Long Haochen, after inquiring Yi Xiaolei about it. It was a supportive spiritual stove with a single use, to duplicate any attack after use. Its restriction was that the number of uses was 3 a day, and the choice of this Light of Double Exposure further added to the spiritual stove of purple thunder was naturally oriented for the sake of Sima Xian's pursuit of the path of burst power. His burst power was direct, and needed for the team. Compared to Sima Xian, Lin Shin was a lot more blessed. His 2 spiritual stoves complied to ally with him to an astonishing degree, to the point that he didn't have to take any initiative, and yet the 2 spiritual stoves started to be assimilated into his body at the same time. Given how Lin Shin's control over fire element was astonishingly high, this assimilation was as comfortable as a fish swimming in water, only taking less than half an hour more than Wang Yuan. After completing the assimilation of the 2 spiritual stoves, he became transported to the green pool. The heart of flames aside, the other spiritual stove he obtained was called Spiritual Stove of Flame Eagle, an exceptional offensive and defensive-oriented dual spiritual stove. The Spiritual Stove of Flame Eagle can set free an immense eagle of flames to help him in attack and defense, and can be controlled entirely by the use of the Spiritual Stove of Flame Eagle, and the Spiritual Stove of Heart of Flames attained a high level of compatibility, which was the important reason that enabled him to assimilate the 2 at the same time. After obtaining the Little Pig McDull, her utility for the team increased, but until now, she was only capable of providing some assistance, or accomplishing some particular crucial tasks. She had been always minding her performance in the team, and felt from beginning to end that she never fulfilled properly her duty as a summoner. The better she was treated by her comrades, the more she blamed herself deep inside. At this very moment, the absorption of these 2 spiritual stoves gave her an extreme pain, but she bit her teeth tightly and bore it, not cowering in the slightest. Her eyes were full of resolution, and it was on the basis of this willpower that she completed the successive assimilations of these spiritual stoves. Everyone had different luck, but they invested equal effort. In their lives, people would always get different degree of luck, but everyone would get some opportunities. However, it was up to themselves whether to catch these opportunities or not. Without a doubt, this was the best chance to grab this opportunity for everyone in the 21st General Grade Demon Hunt Squad. As long as they smoothly came out from this trip in the illusory paradise, they were bound to distinguish themselves from the other demon hunt squads. Fusing spiritual stoves was something Long Houchen's group had never experienced before, let alone hearing about the details. Even in the stories about the mysteries of the spiritual stoves that Long Xingyu told him, the act of fusing spiritual stoves was only mentioned in a single sentence. In theory, there was no limit in the number of spiritual stove one could absorb. As long as his body could bear it, he would be able to go on with absorbing those. But how did it go in practice? Generally speaking, a powerhouse would normally be able to absorb 3 spiritual stoves before fundamentally reaching his limits. But acquiring 3 spiritual stoves first of all required a lot of good luck. Order of obtention of the spiritual stoves in the history of the Temple Alliance, there existed some past records of powerhouses who fused with a particularly high number of spiritual stoves, and all had left significant traces in history. However, even more records described cases of an excessive number of absorbed spiritual stoves negatively influencing their wielders' lives. To really absorb more spiritual stoves, there existed another method, and that was to fuse spiritual stoves with each other. Fusing already assimilated spiritual stoves would lessen the number of spiritual stoves in one's body, and thus create more space available to absorb other spiritual stoves. After fusing, spiritual stoves would produce an effect of accumulation, and this would increase their efficiency. This was absolutely a good thing for anyone, but was it really so easy to fuse spiritual stoves? Getting the opportunity to fuse spiritual stoves was first of all extremely hard, to say nothing about the fact that the fusion itself involved an enormous part of uncertainty and risk. Long Houchen's group had obtained such a great opportunity, but it was still too early to say whether they would be able to benefit from it. Soaked in the green pool, Long Houchen was in a sudden calm state of mind. After his awakening as a god's chosen one, his mind was even more focused, and reached an optimum state very easily. Immediately, he sensed his own body being wrapped in the vital energy, permeating him gently. This energy of life entered his body slowly, or at least it felt like it. This harmless and beneficial energy merged with Long Houchen's liquid spiritual energy, enforcing his body and mind, and soon he reached a complete level of relaxation. All his muscles and energy channels actually went all limp at this time. Gradually, this soft vital energy covered his whole body, before slowly rushing into his chest. There, it slowly subsided. The light elemental fairy Yating was seated inside the saint's spiritual stove, as this thin green-colored, vital energy was poured into the saint's spiritual stove. Immediately, a mysterious change was produced. Both of Yating's hands started to adopt a particular pose. As her face revealed a happy expression, she entered a special state. A soft white radiance was emanated by the saint's spiritual stove, producing white circles, which spread inside Long Houchen, who suddenly felt his own brain go dizzy. On his chest, he felt a heating sensation, but this didn't affect his focus state. The liquid spiritual energy in his body was noiselessly consumed at an astonishing speed under this cozy feeling, and in this green pool, his vital energy kept strengthening. But this didn't help in increasing his internal spiritual energy. It seemed that time didn't pass in this place, and Long Houchen felt the warmth in his chest increasing until it reached a burning hot level. After gradually reaching this state, it produced a blazing feeling, as if a fireball was violently ignited inside his chest. However, he felt no worries at that time. If even after his awakening as a God's chosen one, and with his level of understanding regarding his two spiritual stoves, he was still unable to fuse them, who would be able to achieve the fusion? This wasn't arrogance, but self-confidence. However, Long Houchen was still nervous, not for himself, but for his comrades. Long Houchen actually looked forward to see what kind of change would appear after the fusion between Yating and the Saint Spiritual Stove. All he wished for was that the pull ability of the Saint Spiritual Stove wouldn't disappear. In truth, even given his intelligence, Long Houchen forgot the fact that after completing his awakening, his mental state hadn't recovered yet. The pain he had to bear indeed grew stronger and stronger, reaching the point at which he had to clench his teeth to barely be able to bear it. Don't forget that although he only had two spiritual stoves, these were two evolved spiritual stoves. Unevolved and evolved spiritual stoves were absolutely not the same. As a simple example, a Saint Spiritual Stove that never evolved was only a spiritual stove of the 5th tier, but after evolving, it could already be called a spiritual stove of the 4th tier. After 2 evolutions, it even reached the peak of the 4th tier. And furthermore, these evolved spiritual stoves would become a lot more stable and intertwined with the body, making the process of the fusion a lot more difficult. And moreover, he still had the Fairy of Light, Yating. After following Long Houchen, Yating had already evolved 3 times. Let alone him, even a lot of powerhouses that reached the 8th, or the 9th step didn't necessarily make their spiritual stoves evolve that often. 3 evolutions gave Yating a nearly corporeal body, and in the illusory paradise, she had managed to obtain vital energy of her own. In some kind of sense, she was already not as simple as a mere spiritual stove, and her intelligence was substantial. As long as she kept evolving, she would one day finally reach the level of an intelligent spiritual stove which Long Houchen had mentioned before. And that day, she would reach the highest possible tier as a spiritual stove. For this reason, when Long Houchen fused his Saint Spiritual Stove and his Fairy of Light Yating, the difficulty was a lot harder than for anyone else. Of course, the pain Long Houchen had to bear was absolutely not the fiercest, at least Caia had an even harder time than him. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.